Okay. Hello. Just gonna wait for some people to start joining the live before I begin. Okay, we can see some people joining. Hi. Okay, great. Hi everyone. All right, let's get started then. Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Izzy Kent. And today I'm going to be speaking with the artist Mark Steven Greenield, and this will be for Athena Art Foundation. So Athena is a new non-profit digital platform promoting engagement with pre-modern art. And its main platform is its website, which is this hub which presents digital content about exhibitions, podcasts, and other resources. And it also creates original content, including this series of interviews on Instagram. So I do urge you to go and follow Athena Art Foundation if you don't already. Now, my guest today is Mark Steven Greenield. Mark is an American artist based in Los Angeles, California. He's exhibited all over the world, from his native California to Seoul in South Korea and Naples, Italy. And in January, he has a solo survey show opening at the Museum of Art and History in Lancaster, California. Unfortunately, not Lancaster, UK, because I'd love to be able to go see it. But if you are in California, make sure to head over there. Now, Mark's practice concerns itself primarily with the complexities of the African-American experience, both historically and in contemporary society. And his art has reflected upon this in numerous ways throughout a roughly 50-year career. From using stereotypical minstrel imagery to found photography, and his recent series, which is entitled Black Madonnas. And it's this series, along with some other new works, that we'll mostly be focusing on in the interview today, in particular the ways in which he's using the canon of art history and reconsidering it as means of expressing and talking about the African-American experience. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation, and I'm going to try and add Mark to the live right now. So let's do that here. Okay. Send an invitation. Oh, hi. Hello, welcome.
Thank you.
How are you doing today?
Pretty good. Pretty good. Good evening.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for joining us so early from the US. What time is it there?
It's just a little after 10 o'clock.
Okay, it's very good. I hope you've had your coffee, all ready to go.
I'm still working on it.
Okay, good. Well, we'll take it easy to start with, and I feel as the conversation progresses, you can feel more and more caffeinated and energized. I hope that's how it's gonna go down. And where are you? I know you're in California. Whereabouts are you?
I actually live in Altadena, which is about 25 minutes north of the city of Los Angeles.
Gorgeous.
It's right up against the mountains. It's really a nice place to be.
Wow, beautiful. Yeah, I know there's a lot of hiking around there, a lot of gorgeous scenery. What an inspiring place to be. Okay, so I wanted to start off, we're going to delve into the Black Madonnas series and some of your other works, but I thought we could start off by doing kind of introductory back in time, and asking about your arts education and how did you kind of get started as an artist, and what were your sort of primary, beginnings, I suppose.
Yeah, I love telling people about this because I came to art in kind of a circuitous way. When I was growing up, I was really very interested in science and particularly rocketry. And I wanted to send a rocket up. So I had a little chemistry set, and I got a hold of some chemicals that weren't in the chemistry set, and I made rocket fuel. And I had something on the order of a small explosion, which took brows and eyelashes off. Once we got the fire out, my mother gave me a whipping that lasted for the better part of 3 weeks. And so I said, this can't go on forever. And I used to actually make these little drawings as peace offerings to her. And over a period of time, she showed them to other people, and they said, well, maybe he has a little bit of talent. So then she put me into a painting class that was at a frame shop that was in our neighborhood. And I picked the most difficult painting to try to replicate. And I was the youngest person in this class, of course. But the
How
teacher
old were you
I
at
had,
this point?
I'm sorry, oh, I'm 12.
Okay.
Right? But the
Nice.
teacher thought I had a little bit of potential. And so, he encouraged my mother to keep encouraging me. But when I was 16, I really started running around with the wrong crowd. And I had a very inspirational teacher in high school who pulled me aside and told me that I could be a very good artist if I lived that long. And
Mm.
those words kind of resonated with me. And I realized that I had to kind of turn the course that I was going on. And I started really following it, as a possible career path. When I got into university, I realized that I didn't know anybody that was making a living doing this stuff. You got to understand too, it was in the late 60s, early 70s. So,
Mm.
the atmosphere was pretty politically charged at the time. I was very much involved in the Black Power movement, Black nationalist movement. And so consequently, I was a target as far as the school was concerned. When I went to take a painting class, I had an instructor who said that there wasn't enough room in his class for me. So he put me in a classroom by myself. And as a result, I think I missed a lot of the critiques, which might have actually been a good thing.
Yeah. Maybe give you more freedom.
Give me a little bit more freedom. But, it effectively segregated me from the class.
Mm.
So, I started to realize probably in my sophomore year that despite what I thought about the arts, it wasn't quite as liberal or, say, free of racism as I thought it might be. And those feelings were confirmed when I got out of school, because I started taking my work around, showing it to different people, and they were like, well, we like what it is that you're doing, but it's so ethnic, which was code for Black, which was code for unmarketable. And the thing that kept resonating with me was like when I was in undergraduate, I never stopped to think about the ethnicity of Michelangelo or Leonardo da Vinci or. And it's interesting that kind of in a subconscious way, these things have reemerged now in this Black Madonna series. In a way, I think maybe there's a part of me that's getting my revenge against those people who, who basically were forcing those Western canons down my throat, and it's like, okay, I'm going to take what it is that you gave me and twist it a little bit. So a lot of the Black Madonnas, what you'll see is the traditional Black Madonnas that were done by Da Vinci and Bellini and Raphael. But what I've done is I actually put scenes in the background that are of white supremacists that are being persecuted.
Yeah.
In much the same way as African Americans were persecuted, hung, burned, lynched, the whole thing.
Yeah.
So, of course, the question arises, well, why are you doing this? And I think part of it is my understanding of the roots of racism, which really come out of fear. And so in these pieces, what I'm doing is I'm showing those things that might be deep in the subconscious of these white supremacists who are thinking in the back of their head about possible retribution for some of the atrocities that have been committed by some of their forebears. I don't hold them responsible because they in many ways have been misled. But what I'm trying to do is actually counter that narrative of the persecution with this other thing that constitutes universal love, between mother and child. And so for me, the Black Madonna series is really, I think, the most important series that I've done to date.
Wow.
It resonates with people on a different level. It creates dialogue and conversation about things that need to happen. And in my own research about the Black Madonna, I find it fascinating because there's no real explanation in the Catholic Church as to why Black Madonnas exist. For a long time, they were going around telling people that they turned black because of the soot that was in the church, as a result of the candles. But then you'd have a statue of St. Joseph right next to it, and it would not turn black. So what's the deal? Okay. In some instances, I understand just recently, there was one Black Madonna in Czechoslovakia that has been actually painted out. So they put whiteface on the
Oh,
Madonna.
wow.
Okay, and there's a movement. It's very underground to basically detract attention from these Black Madonnas. There are over 500 of them, I think, in France alone.
Oh,
There's some
wow.
in Czechoslovakia, there's some in Switzerland, and of course throughout South America there are a lot of them, because what the church did oftentimes was they would darken the skin of the Madonna to more or less appeal to the indigenous people wherever it was that they were. You know, so like in parts of Asia, you might find the Madonna with slanted eyes and more of a yellow tone, stuff like that.
Yeah.
When I spent some time in Brazil, of course, you know, a lot of the saints, the cherubs, the Madonnas, Saint Joseph's, all those things were colorized
Mm.
appropriately.
Gosh. Yeah, I mean, you've touched on so many of the elements I think that have really drew me to the series. You know, the series was the first encounter that I had with your art, and since then I've kind of gone back and looked at your earlier works and, you know, read more about it. But there's something just immediately just magnetic about those Madonna paintings, and I think, you know, what you said about the kind of the beauty of the mother and child relationship. I think that you know, there's such a sensitivity in the paintings that you're quoting. You know, the Leonardos, the you know, the Michelangelo, the Pietà, the you know, Raphael's. There's this kind of beauty and sensitivity that then transfers into your art and feels even more intimate in the way that in your sort of iterations, because there's also, you know, this feeling that these figures are kind of maybe right now, like the contemporary, like you've given some of them little attributes. Like I saw there's a comb in one of them, and other little attributes that kind of speak to our current moment, and particularly to sort of African American culture. And it's that, yeah, it's that sort of serenity and beauty that it immediately allows you, you know, draws you in. I'm imagining, you know, I haven't seen these paintings in real life, but I'm imagining seeing them on a gallery wall, being drawn in, and it's only then that you see these scenes of violence in the background. After you've seen this beautiful relationship between mother and child, you then see the violence and, you know, the sort of white supremacist violence in the backgrounds, and that, you know, that then makes you, you know, think more deeply. It then makes you think, you know, okay, why is this painting the way that it is? You know, what is this saying about, you know, race in America? What is this saying about all of these different elements? But I think it's that immediate intimacy. I mean, do you feel that is how other people have responded to your work? You know, people who've seen it in the galleries?
You know, I would hope so. You know, one of my intentions was to, in many ways, mimic the idea of the icon. And if you understand the icons really were not considered art. They were almost on the level of talismans. You know, I mean, these icons would be marched out in front of an army that was getting ready to go to war as a blessing and stuff like that. So, you know, I wanted them to maybe exist a little bit outside of the realm of traditionally what we think of as art. And that's why the heavy use of gold leaf, the size of them, they're very intimate. I've tried to do them larger and have not been happy with the results, because I think that it loses that type of intimate feeling that you want to have with these things. So they're the size that actually allows you to, it facilitates the idea of developing a relationship with the work. Okay, and if it's seen as being something outside of art, I'm really okay with that. You know, there's a movement afoot, particularly in contemporary art, that basically discounts the idea of craft. So I think that, you know, I learned in the old school way, and I appreciate craft a great deal.
Yeah.
And so in this particular time in my life, I have the patience, I should say, to actually pursue that to a level that I've not been able to in the past. And I'm really quite thankful that the pandemic has actually helped.
Okay. Well, because you've had more time to kind of focus in and really sort of hone your craft, or?
Exactly. You know, sometimes I liken myself to a monk in a cloistered monastery, like toiling
Which
over
is perfect, you know, because like one form of meditation for these monks, you know, historically has been to create artworks, create religious artworks, and that, so it's almost as though you're kind of mimicking this historic practice, I suppose, of devotion.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
How fabulous. Yeah, I actually I wanted to ask you about your craft and your skill because, you know, again, I've only ever seen these as images on a computer screen, but there is so much detail to them and so much sort of beauty in that. Is that skill something that you're, you know, I was curious about how it's kind of developing at different stages, because in your earlier work, for example, there's a lot of calligraphy and really phenomenal craft of calligraphy in your work, which I was so struck by. So has craft like followed you throughout your career, and how is it right now? You know, who are the, I don't know, yeah, how is it sort of
You know,
manifesting right now?
for a long time, once I realized that I could not make a living as an artist,
Mm,
I intentionally would find some sort of job that would support my ability to do the work.
mm,
And so oftentimes the jobs involve graphic design.
yeah.
So I had a whole nother life as a graphic designer. I got completely fed up with it by the time I was 40, because oftentimes you'd be dealing with clients and the clients wouldn't know what was on their mind, but they wanted you to read it, you know, and they're, you know, how can you read a mind that has nothing on it? Yeah.
This empty mind. Oh my God, that's such a good dig. That's such a good insult.
You're sitting up there throwing ideas at them and they say, well, this is close to what I want, but not exactly, you know. So after a while, you just get tired of that. And I was able to escape that. I got into arts administration.
Mm-hmm.
And for a number of years, I was the director of the Watts Towers Art Center. And then I directed the municipal art gallery for the city of Los Angeles for about 6 years. And so that, you know, it gave me enough of a financial cushion to be able to indulge myself on a lot of levels. And so on one hand, it's like, you know, when you have that type of support, it gives you a certain amount of freedom in terms of the directions that you can go with your work if you're not preoccupied with the idea of selling it. But it's a trade-off. I will tell you this to this day, it is a trade-off. I have nothing but admiration for those people who are purists, who said, I can only do my work and nothing else, okay? Oftentimes they would call me up and say, can we use your shower? What are you having for dinner?
Yeah.
But you know, I could not exist in that type of situation. And as a result, you know, it's like when I did the Black Atcha series, the things that dealt with minstrelsy and blackface. I mean, those were roundly unpopular in the African American community because it was considered taboo. Those are things that you're not supposed to even, you know, you're supposed to bury that stuff.
Yeah.
I come from a tradition of meditation that explains that if you continue to bury things over an extended period of time, they'll come out and bite you in ways you have no control over. And so my idea was to basically take possession of these things, recontextualize them in order to neutralize them and kind of take the power away from them. And it's interesting, over the course of the last 20 years, that work has evolved, the appreciation for that work has evolved, I should say, to a point now where it's not so much African Americans that get upset about it, but it's actually more white people that get upset about it because they realize that it's actually about something in their culture, you know, some weakness, some failing in their culture that caused them to feel they had to do this. So there's you know, this mixed thing of embarrassment and the thing that kind of inspires me is the fact that it has stimulated very, very much needed dialogue on the subject of race. And so if it allows people to get into that discussion, I've done my job.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean those scenes, those artworks where you either are using sort of photography of, you know, of the sort of minstrel tradition, or using, I mean, the cartoons that you've used, these kind of blackface or, you know, stereotypical cartoons, they are quite, you know, confronting. I mean, they're not images that we really see very often in the media. It's certainly not something that you would come across in a museum because it would be so, or, you know, it would be seen as so incendiary, but actually, of course, it's so important to look at those things to acknowledge that history. And it's so interesting what you're saying about the changing reception of that, you know, the fact that it was something that initially was really disliked by, you know, by African Americans, you know, and now it's much more white people who are thinking, okay, this is something I need to confront. I mean, I guess that's also the perk of having had such a long career and such a diverse career, is you kind of see the way in which your stuff is being reconsidered. I mean, are there any of your earlier pieces, I mean, the Black Madonna series, for example, then when I was looking back at your earlier work, I was seeing kind of little echoes to it, little nods that maybe were sort of foretelling of this new series. I mean, are you feeling that? Do you look back on your early work in a new light with this, with this new series that you've done?
Well, there are certain through lines in most of my work that I've just in the last few years come to actually understand. I realized that I was raised Roman Catholic, and I was a devout Catholic until I was about 15 or 16. Or see, I reached the age of reason rather late. But I started to see certain contradictions in Catholicism that I couldn't abide by. I said, oh, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
But one of
Okay.
I had a great deal of appreciation for the ceremony, the ritual, the whole thing of investiture and the mystery that's involved in this whole idea of turning this little soda cracker into like the body of Christ and stuff like that.
Yeah.
All of those things were really they were kind of embedded in me, and so the fact that they're coming out now, this late in my life, is really it's a little curious.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think it's pretty exhilarating on a lot of levels. And it corresponds neatly with my meditative practice, which I've been doing now for about 46 years. And it's mantra based, so it's like every day I'm repeating this mantra. And when you look at Catholicism and you look particularly at the rosary is just like a mantra. After a while you're saying that, but you don't even think about the words anymore. But the act of doing that, the repetition of that, actually takes you to a different place in consciousness. And I think it was intended to,
Yeah.
So,
and that's woven into your art too, right? The calligraphic works that I was talking, that I mentioned earlier. That's also part of your meditation, isn't it?
It is. And what's happened is that in recent years, the process of actually creating those pieces has become much more important than the final outcome. Okay, so I'm almost, the end product becomes secondary. The act of actually creating those almost calligraphic lines, those kind of glyphs, each one of those constitutes a different mantra, or a repetition of a mantra. And so when you do a whole field like that, by the time you decide that I've done enough for today, you're in a different place altogether on the level of consciousness. I actually, if I work on those things long enough, I have trouble sleeping because I've stored up so much energy as a result of doing that. So what I'm hoping too is that when people are looking at these things, particularly if they get into really following some of the lines that I've created with this, that maybe that could have a transformative effect on them if they study it to that degree. It's just a thought. I don't know if people will go there, but
yeah,
it would be nice.
It's so interesting, this kind of juxtaposition of practice, because on the one hand you have this sort of automatic art element, that idea of sort of automatic writing or automatic drawing, but then you also have this really fine detailed craft in your in your Madonnas series, and also sometimes they're juxtaposed, like when you have those the racist cartoons that are on a field of the calligraphy. It's the two methods combined. And I mean, what you were saying about craft, it feels so central.
You could actually take those fields and compare them to the subconscious. All those things that exist in the subconscious that oftentimes you don't make sense of, because there's so much in the background of everything. But those things that exist in the subconscious actually have a direct bearing on the path of your life. And you need to consider that. The first stress that most people experienced was when the doctor slapped them on their ass when they were born. They didn't understand why that happened, but that was a shock to the nervous system. And over the course of one's lifetime, they have multiple shocks to the nervous system. Now, how do those things keep from affecting your conscious life? You have to figure out a way to get beyond that. You have to find a way to more or less expunge those stresses that have accumulated over years and years. Expunge those things to a point where there's a clear channel between your conscious level and the source of your creativity.
Yeah, no, amazing. Returning, okay, I wanted to return. There were so many points when you were introducing the Black Madonna series that I wanted to return to. And one of them is this idea of the cult image. You were saying that you're happy with people treating your art not necessarily as like this high art, like we think of the Renaissance artists, but more as a cult image.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that really interesting because something that I was thinking of looking at your art and thinking about the history of the Black Madonna in art is the fact that these images of the Black Madonna, these historic images, are so often classed as sort of cult objects and not treated with with much consideration. There hasn't been much research done on them. There's more now, but it's, it's a very new kind of field because they've been sort of pushed to one side as cult objects, whereas the artworks that you're quoting from, things like the Bellini, the Leonardos, the Raphaels, those are seen as high art before they're even seen as religious, I feel like now. They're
Right.
seen as great masterpieces, even though they were created as well for the same kind of tradition. And so was this kind of, in some ways, the writing out of his art history, at least, of the canon, the Black Madonna, and the writing into it of, Leonardo and Raphael and these kinds of things. Was this something you were thinking about? And, there are so many sort of implications in terms of like the decolonizing of art history that's happening right now, the canon. Yeah, I wanted to know what you thought about that.
Well, it's God.
It's a big question. I'm sorry. I realize it was.
Your audience needs to do a little bit of this work too if they're really interested. But when I was researching the whole idea of the Black Madonnas, I was amazed at how little information there is out there, and how that information that is out there has been pretty much controlled by the church. There is no explanation that the Catholic Church comes up with for the existence of those things.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, they started hitting the scene around the same time as the Renaissance. Mm-hmm. And if you think of the purposes behind the Renaissance, that whole idea of new beginnings, I think to a large extent, maybe that's one of the things that inspired me to go down that road, because I feel that we're just about at a point where we need to consider new beginnings. Okay. I think that nature will show us that soon enough. Okay.
Yeah.
And so the idea behind the Black Madonna, one of the explanations was that it represents, the black represents fertility. So a lot of people assume that the Black Madonna by itself has some sort of racial significance. But in the lexicon of the church, it does not really. It's more this idea of mystery, black representing mystery, the mystery of the Madonna, the mystery of this mother, this virgin mother. Okay, that's a mystery that everybody's been scratching their head about for a long time.
Yeah.
The idea that all things are possible. Once you have that mysterious color that exists there, anything is possible. The other thing that struck me too is that, when you talk about black and white are neutrals. And one of the things about black is it is the inclusion of all colors. If you mix all colors together, you're going to come up with black. Okay. And so, from the standpoint that it has some sort of universal significance in terms of, looking at man as a being that has this unifying characteristic. Because if you think about the racial differences between people, it's a less than 1% of your DNA that constitutes a difference. So that difference really is minuscule, but we tend to take that 1% and run with it in ways that we probably shouldn't.
I would agree with that. Yeah. Well, yeah, historically and today, for sure.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's interesting because when I was also looking into the history of the Black Madonna, there are lots of these images that I've seen, and you see them while traveling, and you think how interesting this is. But there is very little information, and it's only recently. As well, for Black saints, there are lots of sculptures in Spain, for example. I've traveled a lot in Spain, and there's loads of examples of Black saints where you see these incredible sculptures, in altarpieces.
Right.
And there's so little information other than, the hagiography, the biography of that specific saint. There's very little information beyond that of, why they exist, who are these serving. And so it's really interesting that that's changing somewhat, but also that your art is taking that and shining a kind of a new light onto these works.
Think about the time when those black stains started to appear, though. A lot of it's the late 15th century.
Mm-hmm.
The Moors were still in Spain, right?
Yeah.
And the Catholic Church was trying to make converts. And so it's like, you can't sit up there and throw this white person up there in front of everybody and expect them to go
well,
out.
exactly. I mean, there's this recent book by Erin Rowe on these black saints in Spain. It's an academic publication, and it's and she's talking. She talks about how these were for predominantly like black confraternities, and I think that's also something that hasn't been discussed enough. The fact that the church was trying to cater as well to a black audience, and that is in these countries. Yeah, because you also have a Saints series, right? This is your new.
Yeah, working on a series now. It's called Halo, capital
Mm-hmm.
Hilo,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not all of them canonized saints. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
in fact, some of them are scoundrels.
Yeah.
But I'm really focusing on that period from the 1400s through probably the early 1800s. And I'm concentrating on little known characters that were enslaved who had remarkable stories that have never been really told, slaves that were, well, in particular, I'm thinking about this one who was a slave in Morocco who was taken to Spain. And they realized that he had navigational knowledge. And so he was able to actually accompany the Narvaez expedition to Florida.
Right.
And Narvaez just told him, said, well, we want you to just go scout west and see what's out there and stuff like. So he gave him a couple of ships, and he travels to off the coast of Texas. They run into a storm, washed ashore, half the crew is lost. He and about 60 guys send message back to Narvaez saying, we had this catastrophe and stuff like that. Narvaez says, just keep going west, keep going. So he continues going west, goes through northern Texas, goes through New Mexico, northern Mexico, Arizona. And the whole time his group is being harassed by Native Americans to a point when he gets to Arizona, there are only like 4 of them left. And they're trying to figure out how to make a living. So they have a rudimentary knowledge of medicine, and they're going around and they're healing people. But in the course of this, it said that one of the people they tried to treat died.
Mm-hmm.
And that after that, the Native Americans killed him. But alternate story. And the alternate story was that the Native Americans helped him fake his own death. And from that, he was able to gain his freedom and traveled all the way out to California. Okay. We don't know if that's true or not. Okay. But one of the things I've chosen to do is actually take some of these little known characters and put a halo around them. Because, in just the same way as the Catholic Church can throw a halo around anybody they want at any time for any reason, as long as they can achieve a certain number of miracles to you. And, as long as the Grand Inquisitor isn't too inquisitive. Right? So I've decided to take some of these people, some of them who I consider to be martyrs. There's Marie Joseph de Angelique in Montreal. She was roundly mistreated by just about everybody. She kept telling her master, I'm going to burn your house down. I'm going to burn your house down. And one day there was a fire in 1734 in Montreal, and most of the city burned down. And they blamed her because she kept saying, I'm going to burn your house down. So she was made to actually hold a torch in front of the cathedral in Montreal. And then after that, she was herself burned at the stake, okay? And then about 3 weeks later, they figured out, oh no, she didn't do it at all, okay? So despite her saying, I'm gonna burn your house down, I considered her to be a martyr. you know, and so hence I put a halo around her, you know.
Yeah.
Or the
And it's
guy
great.
named Henry Box Brown, this guy who basically mailed himself, he was a slave in Virginia, put himself in a crate and mailed himself to Pennsylvania. Almost died in the course of it, but you know, he gets to Pennsylvania. He takes up magic, becomes a magician, isn't very successful in the United States. And then he finally goes over to Europe and becomes wildly successful there. Okay.
Amazing. Yeah. No, it's amazing having I don't know, raising these stories up from the depths of history, and you know, there's also been there's, you know, a lot of work at the moment and discussion around the fact that these things have been purposefully buried in history, or you know, it's been part, you know, this is an active you know, part of sort of colonial writing of history, is that these stories aren't known, and so it's great to be able to, you know, take them out of obscurity and deify, canonize these guys, you know, turn them into saints, have halos, and you know, put them, you know, in the public eye. But as you said, some of them aren't particularly great people. I remember you told me about one of a pirate, is that right?
Oh yeah. This guy named Black Caesar, who actually spent some time working with Blackbeard the pirate. Okay. But one of the things that they would do besides what pirates do is when they come across a slave ship, oftentimes they would liberate the slaves that were on the slave ship. And then they give them a choice. You can either join our band, or we can put you on this island here and you can do what it is that you want to do. Okay.
Wow.
And oftentimes these people, having no other source of support, would join the pirate crew. Okay. So eventually, you know, it's like, I'm sure, you know, that Caesar probably killed a lot of people, but he also saved a lot of people too.
Yeah.
So, you know, he gets a halo.
Yeah. No, you know, I didn't know anything about him, and also there are loads of saints that did pretty awful things too. You know, I mean, if we, you know, a lot of people who've been canonized who have kind of shaky histories in that way as well. So it's you know, you're just rebalancing the books. It's okay. These people can all be saints.
We had a movement
It's in
a long time where they were trying to canonize Junipero Serra. Okay. And I think the Grand Inquisitor got involved in that and realized that, you know, so many Native Americans actually died at the hands of the church, you know, to more or less save their souls. Okay, we're going to kill you, that type of thing. So, you know, not everybody that the church considers to be
canonize.
Considered, you know, yeah. Pretty ugly.
Your patron saint series made me think. So I saw this artwork. I don't know how long ago you did it, but it's the patron saint of passengers. Is that the title?
And that's interesting that you should bring that up, because that piece was pivotal at the time, and you know, it has now manifested itself 20 some odd years later.
Okay, is that how long ago it was?
Yeah, it was 21 years ago that I did that piece. And that was actually based on a different series that I did that dealt with the whole idea of genealogy. I got into genealogy in a kind of circuitous way. My father and I had been estranged for a number of years. He was half white, and he didn't really know too much about who his father was. And when we reconnected, I made it a point to see if I could unravel that mystery for him. And in the course of doing that, I came across a lot of photographs of other relatives. I did my mother's side. On my mother's side, I was able to go back to 1780 with slave documents and the whole thing. On my father's side, I pretty much narrowed it down, but I could never get that part of the family to admit to it. And so it still remains a mystery in terms of who my grandfather on my father's side was. But I decided to take that research and turn it into a series of paintings that was called iconography. And those paintings, a lot of them dealt with family members. And again, it's, you know, it's that kind of thing where I knew I wasn't going to sell any of that stuff, because nobody wants a picture of my grand cousin on their wall. But for me, it was very therapeutic to go through this series.
Although the patron saint is in a museum, isn't it, in California?
It's actually in Flint, Michigan. It's
okay.
It's in the Mott Warsh Foundation collection in Flint, Michigan.
So there
Yeah,
you go. Some people wanted the pictures of it. Do you know the woman who is in that photo? Then I
I
didn't
do not.
realize it was. Oh, okay.
I do not know the woman, and it's just that it's a photograph who somebody gave to me when they realized that
Hmm.
I was using old photographs of my family members, and it sat around for probably the better part of 4 or 5 years. And
Mm.
I looked at it one day in the FLAC file, and for whatever reason, that particular day, that photograph talked to me, you
Yeah.
know. And so it was just a natural to go and use that piece. So it was again the patron saint of the middle passengers, and the idea of that whole middle passage thing has actually kind of reemerged in some more recent pieces that I've done, particularly this piece called Zong, which deals with the Zong massacre.
Mm.
A lot of people are not familiar with it, but there was a slaver who was coming from West Africa who did not put enough provisions on the boat to take care of the cargo, in this
Hmm.
case, slaves. And so he dropped 130 of them into the Atlantic, middle of the passage.
Wow.
Then he gets to Jamaica and he tries to file an insurance claim, which was denied. Okay. He
Yeah.
gets he goes back from Jamaica to England. He tries to file the claim again, and again it was denied. But this time it got a lot of publicity. And as a result of that, it gave rise to the abolitionist movement in England. And
Okay.
within a number of years, the slave trade was outlawed by the British Crown.
Wow. I didn't know. I think I maybe had heard the story slightly rings a bell, but I didn't know, the name or the details like that, or that he tried to. I mean, that's kind of horrific that he tried to file an insurance claim over that. How?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it was property.
Yeah.
It's law property as far as he was concerned.
Yeah.
So I've done this piece called Zong, and it's interesting because there's a J.W. Turner piece that's called Slave Ship, I think, that
Hmm.
is also loosely based on this. I think it was done in the 1840s or something like that. So,
Great.
once I had some friends that came over from England and they saw Zong and they immediately told me about the Turner piece. And I was
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
it's funny how stuff comes around.
And are you now looking at Turner? I mean, I know that you seem to have all of these art historical references sort of throughout your art. Are you thinking maybe of sneaking Turner in there somewhere as well?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
No, it's like, you know, there's a point where it's like I don't know if I could go any further on that than he did. And I love those pieces. I love all of those pieces that he did. But no,
Yeah.
I'm actually I'm gonna probably finish out this series of Halo for a while. I've got maybe 10 or 15 more that I want to do.
Hmm.
And then I'm probably going to step away from that and do some things that are a little bit more conceptual.
Yeah, fantastic. The
You
the
know?
last thing before we wrap up, because I'm realizing we're going a little bit over time than what I said, but I told you that this always seems to happen in our conversations. But I didn't want to end without talking about the two altarpieces that you did, because those triptychs, because I
Yeah,
found them so just like knocked me sideways. I thought those were such amazing pieces of art, and they're sort of full of like they've got the Michelangelo's Pietà as the central piece that you've restaged, and I wondered if you could just talk a little bit about those pieces.
yeah. Those pieces are really quite special to me. When I worked in Watts, I had a lot of interaction with the two predominant gangs that were there, the
Hmm.
Crips and Bloods. And I was there at a time when the peace treaty between the two gangs was agreed to.
Hmm.
Uh, and I realized that, having my own experiences working with gangs when I was growing up, that a lot of the motivation for being in these gangs comes out of the need for unconditional love.
Hmm.
Uh, and so those two pieces actually are a celebration of that gang truce. One of them is called Truce. Okay.
Yeah.
And so I have a figure in the foreground of the piece that basically is modeled after one of the Aguns. An Agun it comes from a West African ceremony where
Hmm.
you have these people who are possessed that embody both positive and negative energies and stuff like that. So the Agun in this instance is acting as a mediator between the Crips and the Bloods.
Hmm.
And then with the idea of collateral, I know of people who were killed as a result of crossfire between these two gangs.
Mm.
You know, I think that it's important that people remember that they remember that there were a lot of innocents that were killed in the course of all of this. And putting this piece up hopefully would serve to reinforce the idea of the truce. I do have in mind doing another triptych
Mm-hmm.
based on this. I'm still just kind of rolling it around in my head in terms of what that would look like.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm kind of interested in the idea of the Annunciation.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I might do something with the Annunciation.
Oof. Okay.
I have an idea of, a guy on a mic, another guy holding a bullhorn.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I can see it. Well, I want to see it as well. You gotta make that happen. But the Annunciation is such an iconic image in, the history of Western art, and the many
Right.
ways in which that's been done. Just thinking of the gorgeous Fra Angelico, and yeah. Well,
And then
I look forward to seeing that.
I've also thought about doing something about the Transfiguration.
Mm-hmm.
Because I thought that, the mysteries that are involved in that could be a lot to play with.
Yeah, yeah, and that could also be a big scale. I mean, how large are those triptychs? Are they
Those are some of the larger pieces. They're like 56 inches
okay?
by
Yeah,
32, something like that. Yeah.
yeah.
Again, I'm really shy of going much larger than that because I
Mm-hmm.
still want to keep that level of intimacy with the
Yeah,
piece there. So we'll see. I don't know.
yeah. See how
I
you
have,
feel. Well, there's a lot to look forward to. I hope to be able to see some of your art sometime in the flesh. Don't know if there's any plans to get it to come over to the UK, but I know that there's this Naples exhibition as well that you might that is hopefully happening
yeah,
quite soon.
I'm co-curating an exhibition that's going to be at Gallery 1307 in
Hmm.
Naples. Looks like it's going to be in 2023. It's going to be
Okay.
both there and it's going to be at the California State University here. And it deals with the idea of slavery and commodities. So
Mm.
the artist who's going to take a different commodity, one's going to take tobacco, one's going to take sugar, I'm going to take cotton.
Hmm.
So everybody's going to take something. We just discovered an artist who lives in Rome who's going to be doing something on bananas and the slave trade.
Okay.
You know? So
Yeah.
it's
Wow.
still in formation. It's still being formed, but it's going to be good.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, hopefully I'll be able to see that, and maybe when travel is easier, come over to the West Coast and see some of your work there. But thank you so much for speaking with me today. We've had loads of people watching, coming in and out, so thank you everyone who's been watching. And yeah, I'm gonna upload this to IGTV. But everyone who's watching, thank you so much, and please do go follow Athena Art Foundation, which is the facilitator of this conversation and this whole series. And Mark, thank you for your time and your amazing art and your insights. It's been such a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you so much for this. I really appreciate it.
It's absolutely a pleasure. All right, all the best. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks so much.